Welcome to Part 3 of the S&A training series. In this short video, we will discuss some pre-work your group may need to do before employing the S&A concepts. In this video, we will discuss identifying the purpose or goals of the network. The assumption with this series is that you, as a community group, are tackling a complex problem. Tackling that complex problem is the purpose of your group. But how to tackle that problem requires more specific goals and strategies. If you completed the causal loop diagramming training series, then your group has likely identified strategies from that exercise. Any strategy identified in that exercise that requires collaborating with other agencies could be a network strategy, and the network is that group of agencies that need to collaborate with one another. In our case example, the strategy identified was improving social connectivity in the neighborhood, and the network was any public agency, community group, or business serving that neighborhood. If you have not identified a network purpose or strategy, then it is important for your group to discuss what is the purpose that is unifying you as a group, and what do you hope to achieve by working together. The rest of the video will provide some guidance on identifying strategies for the network. As a group, it is important to think through how you will address the problem or meet the identified need. Addressing the problem or meeting the need will not happen overnight, and it will not happen as the result of achieving one goal. However, any effort to tackle a complex problem has to start somewhere. So where will you start? In thinking through where you will start, note that networks are designed for adaptive work, not technical work. If the solution is a database, physical infrastructure, additional resources to fund already existing NIC services, etc., then you are likely not tackling a complex problem that involves a system perspective. However, the complex problem you are tackling is likely wicked because there is not a simple or easy solution, and/or the problem is dynamic in each change over time, or may vary by each case. Therefore, the focus of the network should be on the adaptive work that needs to happen in the short term. Focus on problems where both the problem and the solution require learning and collaboration. For example, with our case example, social connectivity in a defined neighborhood, lack of social connectivity is the problem. But identifying the reasons for the lack of social connectivity requires learning, and those reasons may vary by household. Even once reasons are identified, the solution likely involves multiple pieces, like new programs or services, as well as access to community spaces. Also, focus on solutions that involve those around the table, not those that require the resources or buy-in from those not at the table, at least at first. It will likely be necessary to engage others in the work, but engaging those others will be easier once your group has already shown the collective effort that already exists. It is very important to consider perspectives that are not represented at the table, and it may be essential to make sure those perspectives are included. However, my point is to appreciate who is around the table and the value of their commitment and contribution, rather than focusing on resources that may take longer to attain. For instance, in our case example, the group could have focused on the funders or public schools not at the table, but instead they drew on the community organizations and local business association that was committed to serving the residents in the neighborhood. Lastly, don't be afraid to focus on process goals in the short term. There is no substitute for having a direct impact, but often the work that leads to outcomes indirectly is underemphasized. For example, having opportunities to share information and talk through challenges will often lead to innovative ideas or new ways of approaching an issue. Therefore, creating those opportunities may have just as an important and indirect impact as launching a new initiative. In thinking through strategies, there are a few pitfalls and tensions to consider. Individual versus collective. Organizations need to benefit from their participation, but that benefit should align with the collective. What the collective tries to achieve should benefit the individual organizations collectively, and not only a few select organizations. Unity versus diversity. Networks are more innovative when they bridge silos, so bring together diverse sets of organizations. However, too much unity can lead to groupthink or narrow solutions, but too much diversity can make agreement on direction difficult. Seek out to engage a diverse group, but don't stretch beyond a common purpose that can unite that diverse group. Internal versus external legitimacy. Those participating need to buy into the direction, internal legitimacy, but it is important for the collective to have a public face and buy-in from the larger community about what value it offers the community, which is the external legitimacy. Broad versus narrow. This one is similar to many of the others, but not the exact same. Networks work best when their efforts have broad reach. Will only those around the table benefit, or will the efforts reverberate throughout the system and lead to more participation? Short-term versus long-term. Start small with easy wins and one main goal, but connect those short-term goals with a vision for long-term aims. Plant the roots, and in time the tree will grow. Planned versus adaptive. In connecting short-term and long-term visions, don't overplan. Allow the network to adapt to changing contexts, new participants, or new needs. In addition to being mindful of these pitfalls, recognize that it takes time to tackle a complex problem. And part of the time it takes is figuring out how to tackle the problem. So give yourselves time to frame. People like action, not talk. But jumping into action too quickly results in less impactful action or conflict. For example, some common failures: creating a report or a directory without first identifying targets or means for sustaining or updating that report or directory, or launching a central intake process or program without building trust among providers first. Framing is the process of constructing the frame around the picture of the network, allowing time for brainstorming ideas and getting on the same page. Take time to frame, but with the goal of moving towards action. Be mindful of the pulse of the group. Don't jump at the first great idea, but be ready to move forward when the group has had enough of talk. An agreement is important among those contributing effort, but you'll never have 100% agreement. Make general consensus your goal, but true general consensus will only occur if you have allowed time for brainstorming and discussion and given opportunities for everyone to offer their thoughts. Go with where there is the most energy, and some will drop out, but others will join in. Now it is time for you to brainstorm your strategies. For this activity, you will brainstorm individually for a few minutes and then work as a group or in multiple groups to brainstorm together. First, individually, identify 2 to 3 of the greatest barriers to the identified problem or need, and 2 to 3 of the greatest resources in the system or community. After everyone has had a chance to brainstorm barriers and resources individually, in groups, list the barriers and resources that you came up individually with. Select 2 to 3 barriers to focus on as a group. Then brainstorm 2 to 3 strategies for what a network could do to draw on the resources to address any of those barriers. If you have multiple groups, select one strategy to share with the other groups. Combining strategies is fine, but make sure you are offering a strategy specific enough to gain traction, but broad enough to avoid the pitfalls discussed earlier. These strategies will be used to guide key questions for mapping the network. Several strategies emerged from the brainstorming activity for our social connectivity neighborhood case. One group focused on connecting with the youth in ways that would interest the youth with the intent of developing youth champions in the neighborhood. Another group focused on the need for a communications hub to connect organizations with each other and for newcomers to learn about what's available to them. And another group focused on neighborhood pride, solidifying the culture and identity of the neighborhood to connect people to the neighborhood. The importance of brainstorming these strategies allows for the employment of S&A to help develop these strategies better, identifying who needs to be involved and how they need to be involved in efforts to implement the network strategies. The next step is figuring out who to include in the network, or what we call bounding the network.